Hi, my name is Sydney Call, and in this video I'm going to be talking about diet being the foundation of the foundations of health. As a definition, I would like to define a good diet as a properly prepared, nutrient-dense, and whole food diet. There are many ideas swirling around out there about what a good diet is, and I would like to suggest a diet that is, as a starting point, good for everyone. The simple version of this is that if God made it or nature made it, then it's good. If it's been tampered with by humans, it should be avoided. So to expound further on what I mean by this, I would like to suggest some healthy examples of foods in 4 macronutrient categories: fats, carbohydrates, proteins, and water. And I'd also like to talk about why we need each of these for optimal health. So I'll start with fats. Fats are absolutely necessary or required for good health. And I'd like to suggest 2 groups of healthy fats to consume. And I'll split them into 2 categories, one being those that can be safely heated before we eat them, and those that you would not want to heat before you consume them in order to be healthy. So the safely heated oils would be animal fats that come from an animal that has been well treated, no hormones, no antibiotics, organically fed, hopefully grass fed, in their natural type environment. And then another oil would be butter from a similar type of an animal, coconut oil, palm oil, avocado oil. These can all be safely heated. It won't degrade the oil if we heat them before consuming them. The next category of oils that I'd like to talk about are delicate oils, and they're not safely heated. And in order to have the maximum amount of nutrition out of these, you should consume them with minimal processing and minimal, if no, heating. That would include fish oils, flax oils, nut oils, black currant seed oils, borage oils, and so on. A lot of plant-based delicate oils. The reason why we need a good balance of these oils in our diet is because we need them for prostaglandin formation. Prostaglandins are a hormone that we need to be able to inflame in our body when necessary, and then anti-inflame when necessary. And if our oils are out of balance, then our inflammation and anti-inflammation are out of balance as well. Oils make food taste great. And they also help us to stay satisfied for longer. They increase our satiety level. Along with good oils come good fat-soluble vitamins, which are essential for good health. And also, we have every cell in our entire body has a cell wall that is made primarily of fats. And if we have a good balance of fats, then our cell walls are built properly, and then we get an intake of nutrients and output of toxins, which is critical to health. The next category is the macronutrient category of carbohydrates. And in carbohydrates, you're going to want to eat them as much as possible in their whole food form. So some examples of these categories would be a variety of vegetables, both raw and cooked, of many different colors. The next category is fruits. I would suggest, again, a variety of fruits, and a good starting point would be 2 a day, so as not to get too much sugar. Another category would be grains that are properly prepared, and I want to take a side note on properly prepared. If there's anything that comes from a seed, so that would include nuts and legumes and seeds and grains. All of these things are coming inherently from a plant that has its own innate intelligence, that does not want your body to fully digest and get all the nutrients out of it. What it wants you to do is to eat this and deposit it somewhere else. And so by nature, all of these things that are seeds are going to be hard to digest. And to maximize the nutrition and minimize the digestive discomfort of grains and any other seed, you're going to want to do one of 2 things: either soak it before preparing it or ferment it before consuming it. So Those are just a little side note on grains, properly prepared and in their whole form. And the last thing for carbohydrates is sweeteners, and I think this should be used sparingly and in the most natural form as possible. Fruits being an ideal sweetener, honey's a great sweetener, and then other things like maple syrup and coconut sugar. I would avoid as much refined cane sugar as possible. So the reason we need carbohydrates is because we need them for energy. Our brain really likes a good steady flow of carbohydrate energy. And we also need them for joint health, for building proper cartilage in our joints. The next category is proteins, and what I'd suggest for in proteins is animal products from, again, a very healthy, well-raised, well-treated animal. And the organ meats from these animals, and broths and bone broths made from these animals as well. Wild fish, wild-caught fish, preferably lower on the food chain so there's less accumulation of toxins. Properly prepared legumes and seeds, eggs from healthy chickens, dairy from healthy animals, and preferably grass-fed and raw or fermented is always going to be an easier way to digest dairy and maximize the nutrition. The reason we need proteins is because proteins is essentially a building block for so many things in the body. Enzymes, neurotransmitters, muscles, hormones, our cells, so many things require proteins as building blocks. Another reason why we can use protein is for a good steady source of energy. The last macronutrient is a very important one. It's water. And a good source of water, you can do your own research on this matter, but I wouldn't recommend distilled water. But I do recommend is a water that has no contaminants, but does have minerals in it. As a guideline for how much water to drink, I would suggest if you take your body weight in pounds, then you would divide that in half and have half your body weight in ounces of water every day. And then also if you're having any sort of a diuretic beverage, which would include teas, coffees, juices, sodas, any of these things will tend to dehydrate you. And so on top of that baseline amount of water, I'd recommend adding an extra cup and a half for every cup of diuretic beverage you drink. So a few more categories of things that I'd like to discuss is the ratio of these macronutrients that we should eat. We talked about how much water, but of the other macronutrients, and this ratio is in calories. So I recommend, as a starting point, 40% of our calories to come from carbohydrates, and 30% of our calories to come from fats, and 30% of our calories to come from proteins. And I'm not by any means a calorie counter, but I like to, when I'm at the grocery store and with each meal, try to have a good mixture of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. Another category that I like to discuss is raw food versus cooked food. And again, everybody in their own specific situation will have different ability to handle raw versus cooked food. But an ideal, nutritionally speaking, an ideal to shoot for is a little bit, at least more than half of our food being raw, including raw animal products like raw dairy. So the the next category that I would like to talk about are things to avoid. And like I said before, the things that we should be avoiding are the things that are tampered with by humans. So the short list of the things, but a very important list, are artificial ingredients. Anything that adds artificial flavoring, coloring, preservatives, etc. should be avoided. Any hydrogenated oils should be avoided. And these are things like trans fats or partially hydrogenated oils should be avoided. It's very toxic and bad for every reason that healthy fats, for the opposite of every reason that healthy fats are good for us. Specifically, I'll mention high fructose corn syrup. I think this should be specifically avoided as an ingredient because it is also toxic. It will, it comes from a plant that's genetically modified, and that brings me to my next one, is that we should avoid genetically modified plants. They're sprayed with a lot of toxins, a lot of Roundup, and it's also it creates its own toxin to help deter pests, but these toxins are obviously going to be bad for us too. Another thing to avoid are refined carbohydrates, anything that's not in its whole form. So white flours, white rices, white sugars, etc. Then also I recommend avoiding poorly raised animal products, because animals are such an important one to have be healthy, because they're an accumulation of their lifestyle and their environment and their food and their toxins and their hormones and their antibiotics, and so we don't want to be consuming that accumulation if they've been poorly raised. And then last, I recommend avoiding the oils that are vegetable oils that have been heat treated and non-organic, like canola oils and corn oils and soybean oils that are just on the shelves. They're not being, they weren't properly prepared. They were heat treated, so they're going to be damaged, and they're going to be very unhealthy for our cells. So that's kind of the overview of what I would consider a good starting point for everyone for a diet of properly prepared, nutrient-dense, whole food diet as a foundation of the foundations of your health. Coming up next in another video, I'm going to be talking about digestion, so that we can access all the goodness that is in this diet that I'm talking about, that takes a lot of effort and money to consume. So we'll see you then.